Okay. Next is sexual freedom. It's my body. I can do what I want to do. Modesty is being frowned upon. What are your thoughts?
I actually disagree. I don't think modesty is being frowned upon. I think it's actually in style. It's in fashion right now. Everybody's wearing the long skirts. Everybody's wearing like shirts under their like tank tops or whatever. But when I hear sexual freedom, I think there's definitely the way that Hollywood has portrayed it, which is like just go and just sleep with everybody, which like God aside, that's not healthy. You know, you're going to catch something, sis. Don't do that, right? But I think as a woman, being able to, you know, express or even have conversations about sex, you know, is something that we need to have. But for a really long time, you know, women couldn't even they couldn't even say that they know what that is, you know, or they'd be frowned upon, right? Is it just me, or is this
all of us here? All Africans.
So, like, the fact that you even know what that is, people are going to be like, "Oh, they're going to label you," right? So, in that context, like, I mean, obviously there's got to be like, you know, that line where we're like, okay, we're going a little bit too far, you know. But do women need to be sexually liberated in the fact that they need to be educated on certain things? I remember how I saw this one skit where, like, you know, this young girl was getting married, and then, you know, she comes to her matrimonial home, and the guy's supposed to do what married people are supposed to do, and she literally freaks out. She gets like, you know, she's like, what is going on? Like, what are you doing? Because nobody talks, and if they talk about it, it's in parables. The apple shall not go into the basket. What? Like, what? So in that context, like, you know, I agree. There is a certain level of sexual liberation that women have to go through. But is it like, you know, the type that the world is pushing for? Absolutely not. That is not safe for any woman.
You guys agree with my body, my choice, or how does that phrase go?
No. So I'm going to start from there.
Thank. Finally, someone has agreed with me. Finally, thank you.
I think that the world, we're beginning to get, recent events is just getting all of us to believe that God doesn't have the power to tell us what to do with our body sexually, but he does, because he created us and he created all of us, and he created all of our parts. Then he definitely has the power to tell us what to do with our body sexually and what not to do with our body sexually. And I'm not going to get into that because I feel like both of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I got to a point where I also understood that we women in the church, single women in the church, are very ignorant. It's like we get to a point in our young adult life where things now begin to make sense to us, but it's like, why are these things, why didn't anyone tell me that I was going to get into this point? I was going to feel this way, I was going to desire this way. And we have been taught so much in the church. I don't know how your church was when you're growing up, but mine, I was taught that, first of all, your desire as a woman, you should be able to curtail it. You should be able to hold your sexual desires and everything. But for the man, there's an excuse for them. So
women only should be virgins to men, and, you know.
So who are the men getting together with in the church? Like, that's the question that I ask. So if you're putting a standard if you're forgiving both, forgive both. If you're putting a standard where
I agree,
not engage in it, then that should be the same thing for both of them. The other language that I have really found problematic is that for the woman to lose her virginity. And I use this in context that as a child, I found that word was conflicting, because to lose something means that you cannot gain it back. And so in this context, exactly what is the woman losing? And I get that she's losing her innocence, but then the culture, or the church culture, has also made it as if she loses her dignity, she loses her value, she loses, we have tied the value of a woman to her sexual activity. But I see God giving grace to the woman that was caught in adultery in the Bible. I see God ministering to the woman at the well. I see God using Rahab. And so I don't see in any part of scripture where God ties the value or the anointing or the way that a woman can be used to her sexual desires. I'm not saying that go out there and be promiscuous, but I'm saying that we should not be the people that sit, members in the church, we should not be people that sit in high places and tell a woman what she can and cannot do after she has gotten into these types of engagements. So yes, do we need to understand and explore and have these conversations without fear of prejudice or fear of being judged? Yes. Does God have the absolute right to tell us what to do with our bodies? before marriage and everything, yes, he does. But even in all those things, the woman should never feel like she has lost some value or some dignity or some type of, I don't know, because she has engaged in some type of sexual activity outside of marriage. And then we kind of cut the men a slack and say, oh, you can be pardoned because apparently your anatomy allows it to be so. But the woman's anatomy also gets her to desire sex.
I totally want to jump on that. And that is another thing that women need to be free from in terms of patriarchy. Men are definitely given, more grace
leeway
and more mercy. And slightly, and I don't think it's even a good thing. It doesn't even speak well on men because we're basically acting like they're animals who cannot control themselves. A man can't stay a virgin, okay? You can hold back and you can contain it just as much as we expect women to do that. And I've always said this, when as a feminist, my goal is not to stoop down to what men are doing. It's to bring men up to that standard. If I'm going to keep myself until marriage, I expect you to do the same thing. I don't care that, you're a man and like you boys will do what boys do. No, like you're a human being, you can control yourself. And if you can, I understand that. And I will give you the grace and the mercy that I would want if I were to, I guess, fall or make that mistake. But for me, what I find is always irritating, and you said it and you touched on it, and I've actually spoken about it in my Instagram stories, a woman's value and dignity and worth is tied to her virginity. And it shouldn't be that way. Like, you are not dumber because you've had sex before. You are not less smart. You don't bring less value, and you're not less, you're not less of a good person or a good partner or a good wife because you have made that mistake. Yep. But men, on the other hand, they can do, and people can be like, oh yeah, he's a great man to marry, go ahead and marry them. But a sister in the church, if she's done that, oh, don't marry her, she's no longer a virgin. Like, what? That's horrible. And that's what women need to be freed from, that shackle of like, how do I even describe it? Like, it is a shackle because women aren't given grace and they're not given mercy.
I just wanted to touch on that and say that I find that what's even interesting is that we have been conditioned for a very long time that we keep ourselves for the man to in marriage. And I think that's a very wrong way to orient women to keep their virginity.
That's true.
It is for God. And so if I'm doing this, it should not be because I want my husband to respect me or my husband, because that's not going to happen. It should be because first God instructed me to do so. And so
Amen.
I want to do this for myself. If anything, the man comes third.
One thing I've always said is also women who then keep themselves, they feel like their reward should be like the perfect happy ending. And that's why, but your reward is you obey God. That's your reward, right? Not that, a man's going to respect you. Women will keep themselves, they get into marriage and like, unfortunately they marry, a joker and he doesn't respect them. You've done what God has told you to do. And then you marry this man and he doesn't respect you. He treats you like a prize, something he's collected. And that, like, when people talk about how a woman should behave in like courtship and whatnot, they always say, oh, men are hunters, they like to hunt. But like, they don't realize that a hunter goes back to hunt again. Like, women are not animals. Like, we're not deer that you should catch. You know what I mean? So you catch me, you've chased me, you've hunted me, you put me on the wall, you go and catch another one. That's what hunters do, right? So this idea that women do these things for men, like you said, Cornelia, is not the right approach. We're not doing it for men. We're doing it because this is what God instructed us to do. And this is to protect ourselves from a lot of things, from diseases. I don't think there's anything that God tells us to do that is not for our protection.
Oh, good.
So if I do something, it's because I believe and I trust that God is instructing me to do this because it's good for me. And then I do that, regardless of if I get a joker or a good man, that is not related or tied to my virginity at all, So when people when women, they do this thing and they're like, okay, my reward is going to be like a good husband and a good man.
But don't you think that God rewards when people? And then don't you think? Sorry, don't you think like when a woman keeps herself, like God rewards her in some way? I believe that God rewards when you obey His word, in whatever matter.
Yeah, that reward is not getting a disease or like having a deadbeat husband who doesn't care for your kids. That reward is not like this man who's going to respect you and treat you like an egg. That's not related. So when they see women who have stumbled or who have lived a previous promiscuous life get what they don't have, they feel resentment. They're like, I kept myself. I was a virgin. How can that whore get a good husband? Right? It's like that's not tied to what you get in life. Like that's not how it works. right? But people think that because they tie it, like women, when you know an older woman tells you, oh, you know, keep yourself, like a husband's going to respect you more, so they go into this relationship thinking that they're going to get more respected, but they don't get it. But that's not why we do it. We don't do it because, you know, some man is going to respect us, because that's not what respect is tied to, unfortunately, and people don't understand that.
Wow, this is powerful. We've touched on different issues. Problems with purity culture. Okay, let's move on now. Masculinity. Why is it toxic?
Masculinity isn't toxic.
God created it. So why am I hearing terms like toxic masculinity?
Masculinity isn't toxic. There are certain traits that are labeled as masculine that are toxic. Does that make sense?
No, not to me. Not yet. Explain.
Okay, so being masculine entails a lot of things. Okay. Now, when somebody says toxic masculinity, sorry, English is hard now. When somebody says toxic masculinity, they're not saying masculinity is toxic. They're calling out the traits that are within masculinity that are toxic. For example, a man shouldn't cry, or a man shouldn't express or talk about his feelings. That is absolutely toxic. That does a lot of things. First of all, it's really bad for a man's mental health. It strains communication between a man and a woman in a relationship, and it isolates men, fathers, from their offsprings. Men don't express, they're not nurturing, don't talk. A kid can come, oh, dad, somebody beat me at school. You'd be like, shut up your mouth and go and beat them up, you know? Like, they don't talk about the emotions, right? So that in itself is toxic, not just for the man himself, but for everybody around him and the relationship that he builds, right? So when people say toxic masculinity, they're not saying like being a man is toxic. There's certain traits that men have learned or have that has been pushed upon them that are toxic. Like, you should be, as a man, you should be able to express your emotions. Everybody has them, right? How are you going to get help if you don't want to talk about the things that are bothering you?
Yeah, that's what Milka said. I agree. When we started the conversation, we talked about how feminism itself is not wrong, but then there are some people that have taken it and have spun it around, and then we have. So I think it's the same masculinity, where it in it of itself, wow, it's not bad. It's not. It really, if someone is able to model that in a very right way, it's just adorable. But then you have others that are going to have, like she said, certain traits that have been handed down really by culture and just by society and everything. And also just some of them by just the traits of men, like having some men who are sometimes not narcissistic. And I know it's not just men that can be narcissistic, but then it's just that when they are narcissists, combined with their masculine energy, is just a lot to handle. So yeah, I just think that's what it really is.
Anything to add, Milka, before we move on?
I think a lot of people have misunderstood the toxic masculinity. They think it's an attack on man, but it's honestly just trying to better a society where men can be don't have to put up this front that they have, if they lose a job, they have to now beat themselves up. It happens. Like, it's fine, you know. Like, tell your wife, I lost my job, you know, it's gonna be okay. Yeah, like a lot of people tend to think that it's an attack on men, but it's not. There's a shift that's happening, and people are resisting it just because it's been something that's been around for such a long time, and it's hard to let go. But, you know, I think if people are really open-minded and try to understand why this is needed and the benefit that it will have for everybody, you know, people will be a little bit more open. We could have a better conversations.
Yeah, and moving on, we're three of us are Africans, so when we bring feminism, religion into the whole mix, it's very dicey. And the only reason, or one of the only ways I've been very, very sympathetic with the feminism movement is when it comes to Africa and the women back there. Because women back there have no rights. Like, I don't know, rooms in Nigeria where if men are in a room, women can't just walk in and sit down. Like, you know, there are some landlords that won't allow a woman to rent a property, single woman to rent a property, because there's fear that she'll be promiscuous and bring men in. So women, I think that in terms of women's rights back in Africa, there needs to be change. How do we push past the whole cultural, a woman is supposed to be in a certain way, a woman is made this pressure for her to get married, a woman is created for the man, supposed to be in the kitchen, have kids, plus that pressure of the Bible where the Bible says you should be submissive, you know? How do you juggle those two facets, the cultural and the biblical?
That is a loaded question.